Hello and welcome back to PECO TV. This is the first of a two-part series looking at Wills Craftsman kits and the Wills Scenic series kits, which complement the Craftsman range. This series will look at the construction of a small diorama and the use of these kits to bring the whole thing to life. We will look at the very best ways to build a Craftsman kit, which is one step away from a complete scratch build, plus the tools and the glues required. We'll also be featuring a new track product from PECO, the Code 100 SL103 concrete sleepers, as part of our diorama. Right, so let's get started. Jeff and myself have drawn a scale drawing and come up with a rough concept for what we wish to achieve. We made sure the sheet of paper is the same size as our diorama, and we sketched roads, buildings, streams, ponds, plus a railway embankment. Then, after careful consideration, I begin cutting and preparing the base with 25mm thick polystyrene to form the land for the diorama, plus I will cut and fit edges to make the sides of the diorama look really smart. After a bit of mess and some time later, this is what I've come up with. I have started the sculpture of the land at the front and produced a large embankment at the rear. I have positioned the Wills SS38 cattle creep or culvert, which on this occasion I'm using the latter, for a stream to flow under the railway embankment and into the sluice gate. So before I can go any further, Jeff needs to make a start on the SS84 water wheel and sluice gates. He needs the right tools to build this kit: a pin vise, a pair of pincers, a modelling knife, and a range of files and a pair of plastic snips. All of these tools and more can be found in both of the PECO tool kits, the PT100 and the PT200. Jeff will also be using a range of poly cements. First of all, Jeff removes the items from the packaging and looks at the instructions before placing them to one side for later reference. He then cuts out the larger items from the sprues, leaving only the tiny cogs and hinges left in place, and he then puts all these tiny components in a pot so they don't get lost. Note, when removing the blades for the water wheel, leave enough of a tiny peg on each end to act as a guide when fitting into place. Jeff starts by placing one side of the wheel on a flat surface and drills out the pre-made holes with a pin vise for both blade attachments. He does this on top of a block of wood so he can easily drill through with the pin vise each piece of plastic without damaging his cutting mat, and then he repeats this whole process with the second half of the wheel. He then positions the blades into the location holes and cements them in place by making sure that all the blades are nice and squarely pitched radially and that all the blades face the same way. Cement the second side of the assembly and then insert the drive shaft and attach the thread bearings onto the shaft, but don't cement until you know the position of your wheel in relation to your building. Next, Jeff turns his attention to the sluice gates. He cements the gates to the support columns. The height of the gates can vary to suit the situation. Fit the racks on the top plate. Then thread the racks through the plates into position on the gates before cementing the top plate to the column. Thread the cogs and the support brackets into the shaft and cement the supports into position first, then slide the cogs along the shaft to engage with the rack and cement in place. Then attach handles to each end for individual control of the gate, or one end for dual control, and there we go. He leaves it to one side to dry overnight before I paint and fit into the diorama. Next, Jeff turns his attention to the more ambitious part of the series, the Wills Craftsman kit, the CK13 Country Inn. Now for this kit we're going to need a few extra tools on top of the ones we've already been using. We need a razor saw, a set square, a larger file, sanding block, and a large retractable utility knife. Plus, Jeff will also show us a unique way to get a 45-degree angle on the edge of the plastic walls, but a bit more on this later. It's also good to point out that PECO produces from the Shows You How series a booklet number 27, Building Wills Craftsman Kits. This handy little booklet is a great guide demonstrating lots of hints and tips on how to get the best out of your Craftsman kit. So look out for it in your local shops. Jeff starts by cutting out all the templates for the walls. It's a good idea to mark out the parts on the templates slightly oversized in order to avoid cutting the parts too small. Jeff marks out the brick portions of the walls, ensuring that all the brick sheets are used the same way up and that the cement courses align accurately on the corners. Jeff needs to cut out all the windows, doors and architectural features. Then he paints PVA glue onto the back of each brick material sheet and sticks the template face down, making sure the base lines up with the bottom row of bricks. All the brick part of the rear elevation is cut from a single sheet of material, with the exception of a very small tip of the gable over the coachway. When Jeff has cut out all the wall shapes, he then needs to cut out the windows. First he positions the plastic sheet on a block of wood and then using a pin vise drills many holes to form a square, and then using a retractable knife cuts out the little pegs between the holes. Then he uses a small scalpel and a file to finish the edges. Next, Jeff has to miter all the components where required so that the brick and mortar matches on both sides. Jeff does this at a 45-degree angle to get a perfect join, but he's made a clever little tool, and it's an offcut from a piece of wood which has been cut at 45-degree angle with an incision cut halfway through its length. He then places the sheet into the piece of wood and clamps them into position so he can file the edges into the required edge like this, giving Jeff a perfect 45-degree angle. Once Jeff has mitered all the walls, including the tile hung sections, then the wall sections need to be joined together flat. Then they're ready for painting. And that's it for this episode. Next time in part 2, we'll be looking at the rest of the Craftsman kit build, plus I will be completing the Scenics for the diorama and installing the water wheel and sluice gate. In the meantime, stay safe and keep modelling.